In this video, we're going to be creating our first console application. So let's get started right away. Bring up Visual Studio and then go to create a new project. And then we can narrow it down to say console app. So maybe you did that already, maybe you didn't, that's fine. But you can always just go to C# Windows and then select console in this third one, or you can just search console and then it will narrow it down for you. Now we're going to start off with a .NET Core console app this time. So I select console app .NET Core, click next. And then we name it differently this time. So we have a project name. So I'm going to call this one Hello World. That's the name of the project. But then I'm going to have multiple projects underneath my solution. So I don't want my solution to be called Hello World, and then I'm going to have multiple projects with other names. So naming is very important. It helps you to identify exactly what you're seeing, and it just makes life easier pretty much. So I'm going to call this entire solution console programming, because once again, we're going to have this solution with a bunch of projects geared towards us learning console programming. So the solution name, once again, is console programming, but the project that we're creating right now is called Hello World. So I'm just going to click create and allow Visual Studio to do its thing. Now, when Visual Studio launches our project, you're going to see something very, very, very unique. You notice that it already launched our program that we just said we're going to write. It is printing Hello World to the console. Now, I just want to, before we look at the code, I just want to point out that the solution is going to, or Solution Explorer is going to have a slightly different look. So if you're used to .NET framework, I know you're using .NET Core, then the files, the layout may look slightly different, but ultimately it's the same set of concepts. You have your program.cs file, and that is the one that comes open when Visual Studio launches. And we see that we have a class called program, and it has a function called main. And so main gets called once your application launches. Whatever is inside of our main function is what gets fired. All right. If you expand dependencies, then you'll see that you have dependencies, frameworks, and then basically any libraries that you may want. So sometimes you want to do a particular thing and somebody has what they call a library that they've done it in already. You can actually include them and then use the library. But that's for later on. I'm just giving you an appreciation of what you're looking at right now. So now we need to see exactly what happens. So once again, our code is console.writeLine, and then we open the brace, and then we have a quotation marks that say hello world, close quotation marks, close brace, and then semicolon. So I'm going to explain what each token means, but I just want us to see how this works first. So once again, to execute, I'm just going to go and click the start button, or we can just press F5 on our keyboard. We let it build. All right. And then we get our console. So our console, once again, looks something like command prompt. If you ever had to use command prompt, you know, that little black box where you have to type and run commands. Well, that's what a console program is. So we're seeing here Microsoft Visual Studio, debug console. And then we see that it's printing hello world. And then it gives us some data about where it's printing it from. And, it will automatically close when debugging and press any key to close this window. So I can just press enter and that window will disappear and we're right back where we started. Now, let me take the time out to explain exactly what is being written here. Notice one, that Visual Studio kind of tries to give you color coding. You see that it's quite colorful. You have blue text, you have white text, you have, I don't know what color that is, and you kind of have yellowish looking text. Your color coding might be different based on the theme that you're using. So if you're in the light theme or in the blue theme, then your color coding may not be the same as I have it here, but just have an appreciation for what gets color coded. So we have namespace. Namespace refers to pretty much the project, and then by extension, the folder in the project. So if we had a folder in this project with a class file in there, then the namespace would be hello world dot that folder name. So program CS is directly inside of our project. So the namespace is just hello world. All right. We have a class. So a class is a collection of what we call properties and functions, but I'm not going to teach classes just yet. But our first and major class is class program, because that's the first thing that gets fired when a console app is going to run. And then inside of program, we have static, void, main, and it takes some args, right? So I don't want to get into too much detail about what the args means, but just know that if you're going to modify anything in this file, do not modify the class name and do not modify the main function. You can do any bit of changes you want inside of here, inside of the main function, and we know where we're inside because you see the open brace and the close brace. And notice it's kind of hinting where the brace closes. It's trying to do all of that for you to help you not make certain mistakes, or at least find them quickly. So the namespace has an open brace and a closed brace, and inside of those we have the class, and that opens and closes. And then inside of the function, so this is a function, and we know functions because you have the open brace and the closed brace. Inside of the main function, well, you have curly braces and you have brace or parentheses. So sometimes I use them interchangeably. I just realized that I use them slightly interchangeably. So we have the curly braces, and then we have the regular braces or the parentheses. All right. So we know functions because they have parentheses, and they may or may not have values inside of the open and close. So in this case, main has values, and we don't have to trouble that. And then after declaring our function, we have open curly brace and close curly brace. Then we define what this function should do inside of those braces. In this case, we said do a print to the console that says hello world. So notice we have class and we have function. Notice the color coding. Program is a class and main is a function. I'm pointing that out because if you look at the color coding, you'd realize that console is a class, the word console is a class, and WriteLine is a function. And we know functions because, one, the color coding may look the same, and if it doesn't for you, that's fine. But a way to know a function in any C# code that you're looking at is to see that it has parentheses afterwards. Whether or not it has values in there, that's a different story. So I could actually say WriteLine, and then that would just be quite okay. So WriteLine is a function because it has the open and close parentheses. And if I wanted to define the text that I want written to the console, so literally it's saying, this is the console, call the console, and write the line that I'm putting inside of the open and close braces or parentheses. So then I'm going to put back hello world, and that is how our program came. All right. Now I want to annotate this code because, we're all starting C#. I want to look at it tomorrow and remember that, oh, that's what was happening here. So I can just put in what we call a comment by using // right? And then I can type anything I want. So I'm going to say printing to console screen. So that's how I print to the console screen. You can use the // and if you wanted to write a paragraph, maybe you wanted to be a bit more explicit about what everything is, then you can use the / then an asterisk, and then in between those you can have as many lines as you need. All right, just writing some random stuff, and then you just make sure that you close it with the asterisk and the /. All right. Now you notice that when I'm showing you guys how to do things, I'll always open and close at the same time. And that's to avoid making the mistake of forgetting to close it. So sometimes we get carried away and we start writing code and we open the curly brace and write and write and write, and we don't close the curly brace. And then later on, we're getting errors that we're wondering, why are we getting errors? Because everything looks okay. So I'm just going to show you what I mean by getting errors and how Visual Studio goes about showing you that you have errors. So if I forget to close a brace and maybe I forget the parentheses, and notice every line ends with a semicolon, but when we have multiple lines, I'll pay more attention to that. So one, you see that some lines start appearing. So when you have red lines in Visual Studio, that's never a good thing. They can appear because the syntax is incorrect. So the red line here is saying that, hey, something is wrong. I'm not entirely sure what, but something is wrong somewhere. I can always go to the error list and then it will kind of tell me that there's an expected token somewhere. So if I double click that, it will kind of bring me to the line that the error is at, but this is not quite where the error is. However, I can debug this and say that, okay, when I click this close one, it's matching to this close one, which is inaccurate because I have a curly brace here. And then when I click this one, it's matching to this. So that means a curly brace is missing somewhere. So I can just press enter, and then I can put back the curly brace and notice how everything realigns. So Visual Studio will actually realign everything because then it realizes, okay, so you're closing this one now. So let me just realign and re-indent everything so you can see exactly where your code starts and stops. Indentation is very important. It makes your code look clean and readable. Now, two more things. Notice that we have a little asterisk beside the program name, or the code file name rather, and that asterisk is just an indicator that this file has been modified. So you can always just know which file has not been saved when you look at the file name, the tab, and you see that asterisk. You can always save all if you have multiple files, or if you've made modifications and you click run, then it will automatically save, automatically recompile, and then allow you to proceed. So if I have some illegal characters here, all right, and we just looked at errors, I see red lines. Maybe I thought I wrote code properly, but Visual Studio sees it as illegal, then it's going to, one, allow me to hover over it and give me potential fixes. So I'm going to drop down this little light bulb, and it's going to suggest some things to me. Now, the suggestions are usually like grasping at straws because there are errors that Visual Studio knows about. Like maybe you declared something improperly, then it will say, oh, I see that you declared this, but you didn't do this step. Do you want me to do it for you? Then you say, sure, and it does it for you. However, in this situation, this is random text. Visual Studio doesn't know what to do. So none of these suggestions will really fix the problem. Another thing to note is that if I try to execute while there are errors, it will do the build and then it will tell me that there were errors. Do you want to run the last successful build? I tend to always click no because it doesn't make sense I run the last successful build if I'm trying to build my current bit of code. So you click no, and then it will kind of show you the error pane telling you that you have some errors. There's a semicolon expected. All right. So at least it's telling me that if you're going to write code, write it properly, but then the error list is still telling me that there are things missing. There's something here that it cannot cope with. So if I remove this, or I can just comment it out, make it, or let me use the other comment. So I just comment it out. So that's one way to comment, and this is another way to comment, and then order is restored. And if you look down here, there are little visual cues along the way to tell you how many issues you have. They're telling me no issues found. Now that I've fixed my errors, I'm just going to run my console application once more. And then we see that we have our hello world printing to the screen once again. So I can press enter. Now, if I ever wanted to find this project, find the files, I have the project, I have the solution, I have the project, but I don't want to open it in Visual Studio. Maybe I want to put it on a flash drive. I want to physically move it or to some storage device so that I can use it on another machine. Then we can easily just right click solution, and then you'll see open file in File Explorer. So when I do that, it launches my File Explorer showing me this file, and I'm going to see if I can zoom in a bit so you can see what the files look like better. So then this is the most timeless logo in the .NET community. This is the logo that represents the solution file. Once you double click the solution file, it will launch Visual Studio and basically launch the projects that are inside of that solution. So that's one quick way to get back to your project that you're working on. You just find the physical location wherever you stored it, you double click the solution file, and then it will launch Visual Studio with all of the code that you've written. Notice Hello World is in its own folder, and that's because it is a project. So each project will get put in its own folder, and all of them will be in one folder together with the name of the solution. So the solution was console programming. It created a folder. Then it gave me a solution file. Notice the extension is .sln. And then for each project, it gives me a folder with that name. So like I said, the naming is very important. So those names are manifesting outside of Visual Studio. And then if I look inside this folder, I'm going to see a bunch of little files. But we'll get back to those files and what they're really about. That's it for building a Hello World console application and understanding Visual Studio a bit more. Next, we look at how we write a program to receive data from a user and print something back to the screen.